Hi everyone, and welcome to SAMA. SAMA is a program which invites experts each week to discuss a topic from their area of expertise. And this week we are lucky to have Sean McCormick to teach us about floatation therapy. Sean is a performance coach, wellness entrepreneur, biohacker and workshop host. He works with individuals and organizations to help them increase their effectiveness and deepen their purpose. Since founding Float Seattle in 2012, the West Coast's highest rating float centre chain, Sean has floated for over 600 hours and has cultivated a float practice parallel to his meditation practice, uncovering a spiritual and personal development approach that has reached over, wait for it, 30,000 people throughout the Pacific Northwest. Sean, it's fantastic to have you with us. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
What is floatation therapy?
Floatation therapy comes by a lot of names. Sensory deprivation tanks, flotation tanks, isolation chambers. These are all different names for the same practice, which is to literally float in 10 inches of Epsom salt water with 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt in the water.
Wow.
So it's nearly saturated. It's more salty than the Dead Sea. And when you float in a float tank that's wider than your arms can go out to the side and longer than your arms can go, when you're in a flotation tank, you're literally floating on your back, totally buoyant, for a purpose. The buoyancy is caused from the Epsom salt, from the saturated solution.
Yes.
And there are myriad benefits. During this float, the aim is to achieve what's called REST. And REST is an acronym for Restricted Environmental Stimuli Therapy. So unlike what some people think about when they think of float tanks or sensory deprivation tanks, that it's like torture, right? That they're going to go into this creepy box and freak out. And maybe some of the viewers and listeners have seen the movie Altered States, where the guy goes and floats. It was with William Hurt. It was in the 1980s. That's most people's cultural reference. Recently, it's been referenced in like The Simpsons and Stranger Things, where it's becoming more and more popular, but it still is not anywhere where it should be. So the benefits of 1 hour in a float tank are equivalent to 4 hours of REM sleep. And the reason is because when you float, your parasympathetic system kicks on. So rest, digest, blood flow, those sorts of natural occurring processes in our body begin to come more into the forefront because you are in a parasympathetic state. You're not responding to external stimuli, floating in the dark, or you can leave the light on, in the quiet, or you can turn some music on. But when you're floating in that totally buoyant state, the clinical research shows it helps with anxiety, depression, hypertension, insomnia. There's a giant list of other things that it does, but that was a long explanation to a very simple question, but the rabbit hole is deep.
Wow, well, we'll go down that rabbit hole. We'll see where it takes us. But how did you first get involved with flotation therapy?
Yeah, I have meditated since I was a kid. My folks taught me transcendental meditation when I was 12. And so my meditation practice has ebbed and flowed, through my teens, high school, into college. And it has shifted from Zazen to mindfulness to TM, back to mindfulness. And in the research on how I could deepen my meditation practice, I kept coming across this reference to sensory deprivation tanks.
Yes.
And what it does is it sort of meditates you. It is a meditation device because that nothingness, that non-thought, that theta brainwave state that we look for in meditation, it is provided in the float tank. And so in these papers and books where I was looking to deepen my meditation, it kept coming up. And so I did what any curious guy would do, is I found somebody on Craigslist, basically the online classifieds. And this guy had a tank in his house, in his basement. Yeah. And I went. Of course I went. So this was the only float tank in the city that I live in, which is in Seattle, Washington. And so I went and floated at this guy's house as a way to really explore my own consciousness. I've always been interested in consciousness, in altered states of consciousness. And so I floated at his house, and I had a transcendent experience. I had an out-of-body experience on my very first float session. I could tell, like, we can go back to that, but that first initial experience was poignant for me. It changed my, to project involuntarily out of body kind of changes the way that you think about yourself. And then I forgot about it for 4 or 5 years. And while having conversations with my wife about what we wanted to do when we grew up, we were both working desk jobs that we weren't in love with. We were exploring alternative lifestyles. We were going to do a juice shop in Hawaii. We were going to teach English in Thailand. We were looking at all these opportunities. And I said, what about a float center? My wife goes, what? And I go, you remember that one thing I did at that one guy's house? I got naked and floated in his, she's like, oh, I do remember that. And I said, there should be a float center in Seattle. There's one, 6 hours away from us. What do you say we take a look at this? And so she never says yes to any of my shenanigans. So when she said, okay, the doors swung open. I threw myself into the research. How can I bring this to market? How can I start a business? How can I make this like an intricate part of my life, a fundamental part of my life? And 2 years later, we opened our first location in 2012.
Your story about going down to a stranger's basement, hopping into a room which has got no lighting, he's got the water. You're a brave person. If you ever watched a horror movie, that's how they almost always start. You go down to the basement.
Yeah. I knew that. I was so committed. I wasn't naive about the risk that I was taking. I was so committed to this. Yeah. I wanted to try it so badly that I was willing to go to Brian's house, and he invited me in and said, come this way. Yeah. So he and I went downstairs into his basement. He had kids' toys everywhere. He's a yoga instructor and massage therapist, hippy dippy guy. Yeah. I'm like, this guy's probably not going to murder me. Yeah. And then he says, okay, go ahead and strip down and go take a shower. And I was like, now? He's like, yeah, now. So I stripped down and took a shower in his kid's bathroom down in the basement, and then made my way back into the float tank, and he shut the door on me. He could have locked me in if he wanted to, but he didn't.
The Epsom salt, that's got huge amounts of potassium in it, isn't it? So
it's magnesium sulfate.
Magnesium. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. Magnesium is an important, magnesium and potassium are really the two minerals that we lack in a major way. Magnesium fuels mitochondria. It lubricates the synovial fluid in joints. It helps you relax your muscles. It helps you get to sleep. Most headaches are associated with a deficiency in magnesium. And when you take magnesium orally, you excrete most of it. Your body doesn't keep most of the magnesium. It just excretes it. But when you float, your body absorbs it through your skin, which makes it immediately bioavailable. Yes. So as soon as you get in there, your body just like opens and relaxes and literally melts into the water. The benefits last for days and days.
Wow. So it's got that pure physiological thing. You know, everyone knows you add Epsom salts to your bath if you've got, you know, creaking joints or other sort of cramping pains in your muscles even. So this is on a large scale, at 1 ton of it. The tank.
Yeah. It's the same thing that my mother and your mother did growing up, which is to throw a handful of Epsom salts in their bath every night. My mom still takes a bath every single night. And this is just that, you know, times 1,000, because there's 1,000 pounds
Yes.
In the float tank. So it's a pretty intense solution.
Is the water warm in the tanks?
Yes. The water is 93.5 degrees, which is the external temperature of your skin. So the internal temperature is obviously 98.6, but the external layer of your skin is at 93.5.
Okay.
And so the water is specifically tempered in that way so that you can't really tell what's your body and what's the water. And the atmosphere inside of these float tanks is such that you really do feel like a baby floating in outer space behind you. I mean, it's that consistent. It's specifically designed to allow you to sort of forget about your body, and it's effective.
I'm happy you used that as the analogy, because I was just about to say that a baby floating around in the embryonic sac is, I guess there'll be some light passing through the skin and through its eyelids, but it won't have many senses, you know, well, actually you'll be hearing it as well, wouldn't it? I think it probably has a lot of senses, but is it emulating in the embryonic state?
It is, and a lot of people walk out of their first float and the first thing they say is, wow, that must be what it's like to be in the womb, because it does feel just like that. It feels just like what it would feel like to be in floating around in amniotic fluid. And you have earplugs in your ears because your ears are under the water, and, you know, good float centers design to block out sound. Yes. So there's no sound coming into the float tank. It's so quiet, and you're so focused and so present with your own body and your own breath and your own heartbeat, like hearing your heartbeat, hearing your respiration, even like hearing your eyelids blink while you're inside the tank. For some people is pretty intense, and yes. And that's what they need. They need to be quiet and sit still and lay back and chill out and breathe, you know?
So it's a way where you can fully remove yourself from the sensory overload of being conscious into the, you know, in the outside. Everything is disturbing us. Everything is, well, overloading us. And so in the tanks, it's nothing. It's like the extreme opposite, where you can. Now you'd meditate, right? Does everyone meditate, or most people just lie down and relax?
Most people just lie down and relax. And, you know, in talks that I've given in the past, I talk about what to do when you're in there, and I always start by saying nothing. Nothing.
End of discussion.
Yeah, nothing. You know, like, I'm not supposed to tell you that you may experience past life regression or have open eye visual hypnagogic imagery or light changing fractals or songs that come out of nowhere. We don't tell people that before they get into the tank. We just let them have their own experience. And when it is so intimate, so personal, so individual, some people have really amazing experiences. Some people are faced with things that they have been suppressing for a while, that just sort of come up, that have been trying to come up for a long time, but they've been suppressing them in their subconscious. and then it comes right to the surface. Your relationship with your mother, your job, your death, these things sort of naturally bubble up to the surface for a lot of people.
Wow. If you do meditation normally and then you do a flotation therapy session, what is the difference? What sort of how is it better, in your opinion, or what you've seen?
Well, the physiological benefits of being supine, being on your back, you get traction on your spine from the buoyancy because there's no gravity keeping you down.
Yes.
And unlike being in a bed, even when you're supported by a bed, you're still being held. And so when the physical repose, the physical restoration, the benefits that you get physically from a float session versus a meditation session are totally different. You can try your meditation technique in the float tank, and sometimes it works, but it really is a totally different experience. And if you're used to sitting on a cushion, breathing, reciting a mantra, that may not work when you're on your back in the dark, in the quiet, swishing around in nothingness. But the mental benefits, the similarities are in the theta brainwave state. And the theta brainwave state is a subconscious state that's like you're not really awake and you're not really asleep. You're in this sort of halfway mid-range, and that there are more occurrences of those brainwaves while you're floating and for longer duration than in normal waking states and even in meditative states. And there are references to lifelong meditators, like Buddhist monks that have tried floating for the first time, that have said, I went deeper in an hour in the float tank than I ever have in my meditation, because it's just so different. The full immersive experience is profound.
Wow. There are a couple of questions that come through our Facebook viewers. There's one from Emma. Can people float if they're menstruating?
Yes. Same as a pool. If you're on your moon cycle, you can just use the same things that you would use if you were swimming. Yeah, totally okay.
Okay. Another question from Elsa. Elsa asks, what should I do after I float?
That's up to you. Yeah. You may want to go have a conversation with a friend. You may want to go eat some food. The food will taste better after a float. I promise. Going for a walk. For some people, the level of tension released in their body from a float session is energizing for them. They may feel like, man, my body feels really great. I want to go for a walk, or I want to go for a run. Most commonly, I think more commonly, is that people are so relaxed by their experience and their mind is so calm that writing in a journal is a good idea. Having a sit, just sitting quietly. Certainly don't pull out your phone and start scrolling through Facebook. Like that's tapping back into the matrix, and that's the last thing that you want to do. But I would eat, I would give some love, I would receive some love, go for a walk, write some journal entries about what your experience was. Spend some time thinking about what you just went through, because the benefits, both emotionally and spiritually, along with the physical benefits, they last for a long time. So the more that you can align with those, the greater the benefit will be and longer lasting.
Now, you've been doing it for a little while now. Have you, in your experience, seen other people's lives change as a result of flotation therapy?
Yes. Yeah. There was an ABC News report that came out to our float center. I think this was in 2013 or 2014. And they highlighted one specific woman in that story, this woman named Ashley, who I still stayed in contact with. She's a nurse, so she would work 12 or 16-hour shifts. she was in a heightened state even after she was done working, and she was turning to stimulants and drugs and alcohol to like level herself. She was self-medicating negatively. Mm-hmm. After her first float, she quit drugs and alcohol and totally changed her life and her health. And what she found is that thinking about smoking a cigarette after going through this, it was no longer appetizing for her. You know, I've seen people lose large amounts of weight. I've seen people totally turn around, you know, crippling depression. Yes. I've seen people recover from surgeries, from traumatic PTSD processing. It's fairly common that when people pick this up as a normal practice, it's not a panacea, but it's the close. If this was a pill that you could prescribe, it would be the number one pill in the world. There's no doubt about it. The effects are that immense. And if you stick with it, like anything, like exercise, like eating your vegetables, like meditation, the benefits are cumulative. So after 2 or 3 or 10, or in my case, you know, 640 floats, the benefits, they last longer, and you begin to be more of yourself in a really, really profound way.
Right. Well, people that are battle fatigued, if they come back from a war zone, quite often the nation turns their back on these people, especially if and it's very, very sad, because they were willing to give their lives, and they weren't recognised as heroes, which is what they are. So they've got that stigma. They've got the sights that they've seen, what they have experienced. Would flotation therapy help them to live a normal life?
Yes, it will. And also, it should be combined with therapy.
Yes.
Because there are things that are going to come up, episodes from your life,
yes,
visions from combat that are troubling,
right,
that demand your attention, that demand that processing.
Right.
So a few therapeutic modalities that work really well with floating are, you know, Gestalt therapy, somatic experiencing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Ceremony of various, I know that's another conversation, but yes, when you have finally some peace and quiet that you don't even maybe get when you dream, you know, for people who are suffering from, you know, post-war PTSD, this is maybe the first time that you've been able to be relaxed, because your body is kind of being forced to relax. And keeping your eyes open is one technique in the float tank that people don't know what to do. They don't know if they're supposed to keep their eyes open or closed. And if when you close your eyes, you have flashbacks or you have troubling images that come up, yes, you can keep your eyes open and just stare into the dark, yes, and allow your body to process that in a different way.
Okay. I wonder why they don't make it a standard practice then, if there are benefits. I wonder if they don't.
It's becoming more popular. There are float tanks at blanking on the names, but there's even organizations here in the States, in Virginia, and I think it's called the Veteran Flotation Project, and it's in Virginia, and I forget the names of the guys. I'm blanking on it, but those guys are specifically serving veteran populations.
Oh, fantastic.
And combining it with other modalities that will help them process their trauma and move on with their life.
Wow.
We've done some work with the wound, with my float centers, you know, giving steeply discounted or even free floats to veterans, because it really is a really useful tool for processing trauma and just getting more in touch with yourself.
Right. A question from James. Is there any age limit for flotation therapy? Can children, for example, float?
Yeah, and I've got a really good story. No, there's no age requirement. It depends. If you've got a really mature 8-year-old and they can sit still, and you can go into the float room with them and kind of hang out by the float tank while they float, you can do it. Well, I got a phone call back when I was using my cell phone as the business number. I got a phone call from this little girl, and she, this cute little voice, and she said, "Hi, is this the floating?" And I said, "Yeah, this is Sean. This is the owner of the Float Center. How's it going?" She goes, "How old do you have to be floating?" And I said, "Well, it kind of depends. If you're calm and mature and you can kind of relax a little bit, it doesn't really matter." And she goes, "Well, I've got a friend who's interested in floating, who thinks it would be really fun and good for her body. And she's young." And I go, "Okay, are we talking about you?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "What's your name?" She goes, "My name's Maud." And I go, "Nice to meet you, Maud." I said, "Maud, how old are you?" She goes, "I'm 6." And I go,
Wow.
"Okay. Yes, you can come into float. I probably want to talk to your mom so that we can put a plan together so that you can get in here." And she goes, "My mom's sitting right here." And I got her mom on the phone, and I go, "Oh my gosh, who is this girl?" And she goes, "She came out this way. She's going to be president someday. She was born like this." And so I talked to her mom for a little bit. I met them to float. Maud floated, her mom floated, and then the whole family started to float. They bought gift cards for friends, and she got a lot out of it. I think that she has some tactile sensitivities, and there's probably a very strong likelihood that she has some intuitive abilities. She's probably an empath. She may be a channel, definitely an intuit. And so she's sensitive to external stimuli. So to be in that state, to be in that float tank, to have a break from the world, from everybody, was something that she really cherished, and she floated really regularly for a while. So no, there's no age minimum. I would just work with whichever local float center is nearest you to coordinate that.
Right. How often would you recommend people, if they do float sessions, how often would you recommend they do that? And
it depends. I think intention is important, and it kind of depends on what you're after. If you're doing it as a semi-regular, stress relieving technique modality to help you balance off the rigors of the world, a couple of times a month, every other week is okay to sort of reset. Yeah. If you're battling fibromyalgia, Crohn's, MS, and you're in chronic pain all the time, you can float every single day. You really can't overdo it. We have lots of members that float 4 or 5 times a week because they don't sleep very well, and this is their only time to really recuperate and rest.
Okay.
So you really can't overdo it. I mean, I still float 2 or 3 times a week because it's my time. I have my float practice has evolved from, oh my God, how am I going to make this business work? I've got to float. I'm so stressed, to business strategy, to spiritual practice. I recovered from a pretty gnarly motorcycle accident with floating alone, floating in some innovative physical therapy. So there's really you can't do it too much.
Right. To prepare before floating, you've mentioned having a shower first. Are there any other preparation things you need to do? Stretching exercises, anything like that?
The suggestions that we give are that you have a little something in your stomach, but not a full meal, so that you aren't having digestion issues while you're inside there, because that's, isn't conducive to relaxation. So we suggest that you have, a little something in your stomach, a banana and some coconut water. No, there's really no preparation. A prayer, setting an intention. My favorite times to float are fasted, usually a 12 or 16-hour fast with a really hard workout, and then go right from that workout right into the float tank to gain those sort of those parasympathetic benefits from going from a heightened state where my endorphins and my dopamine is all up and my circulation, my heart rate is up, to go into the float tank is just like totally incredible. But no, you shower before, you put the earplugs in, you get in, lay back, and the rest is up to you.
You get in, lay back, and lay back.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned before the tank has got 10 inches of liquid in it. Do even large people float?
Yes. We're pretty popular with with professional athletes and college athletes, and there's actually increasing amounts of float tanks going into NBA locker rooms and NFL locker rooms here in the States. It's growing. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're a 360-pound offensive lineman, you'll float the same as Maud, little, 45-pound 6-year-old. It's all the same. So the depth of the water doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter if you sink when you try to float in your pool. You're going to float here no matter what.
Right. Can pregnant people float?
Yes. My wife floated throughout both of her pregnancies. The benefits are immense. The magnesium absorption, more than a few times my wife and I would float together when she was pregnant. And so every little movement from the baby, sounds from the baby, were amplified in that restricted environmental stimuli environment. So we would sing to the baby and talk to the baby. Pregnant women, it's really, really popular with. And what you can do is you can bring in pool noodles or floaties into the float tank with you for extra neck support or knee support if you want to prop your knees up.
Interesting.
Because your center of gravity is out of whack. Well, it's not out of whack. It's just you're pregnant. So, your center of gravity is a little bit off, pregnant. So you can manipulate that with the floaties. And also, in some cases, we've seen pregnant women float face down with their arms resting over a pool noodle, foam cylinder, to do this one to get some some pressure alleviated from their spine. Yes. So yeah, it's really popular with pregnant women.
Wow. Now, is there anyone that shouldn't go to floating? If people have perhaps a skin disease of some form, are there any cases where you'd say, well, probably best not to?
If you have any sort of open wound, you're not going to want to be in there. It's so salty that, even a hangnail on your fingernail, it's going to sting just a little tiny bit.
Yes.
So if you have really bad psoriasis,
yes,
it's going to hurt if there's any open sores on your body. But the salt water kills any bacteria. Fecal form, any sort of outside contaminant doesn't survive. Just like the Dead Sea, it doesn't survive in the float tank. And then it's filtered 4 times. The whole body of water is filtered 4 times between each session. So the water is way cleaner than any pool you've ever been in.
Yes.
But above and beyond that, I've heard both sides. People with vertigo who have trouble, who lose balance and get dizzy. I've had some people have amazing floats, amazing experiences because they can settle in and they don't feel dizzy. And I've heard the other way where it's amplified because their orientation is off. There's a pretty common sensation in the float sessions where sometimes you feel like you're rotating on this axis, but even sometimes you'll feel like you're rotating on this axis going forward. And that can be disorienting a little bit if you're not looking forward, or if you have, an inner ear issue.
Yes.
You can't float if you are if you've dyed your hair in the last 2 weeks, because the hair dye gets zapped out into the float tank. So the float tank zaps all the color out of your hair. If you've had tattoo work done, you're going to want to wait until that's fully healed. But above and beyond that, one of the best things about this is that if you're sick, if you're dealing with something, this is an excellent place to get therapy, an excellent place to get relief, because it's clean and sanitized between each float, and nothing can survive in it. So that nobody's ever contracted anything from a float tank.
Wow. I guess skin conditions would clear up. How about acne on the body? Does that clear up?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have a couple of friends who have experienced that, whether they have sort of acne on their back or on their butt cheeks. And what it does is it conditions the skin. That magnesium absorption conditions your dermis. And so when you come out, the water is really viscous. It's slippery because of the salination. Yes. And what that does to your skin is it flushes and detoxifies your lymphatic system. So yeah, your skin comes out feeling really, really good. There's some people that I know that float just for that specifically.
Do you need to have a shower? Do you recommend a shower of fresh water after flotation, or do you just pat yourself dry?
Yeah, you're definitely going to want to shower afterward to get it out of your hair, to get it off your skin, because it is, dries and it's crystally and sort of crusty. So yeah, for sure, you're going to want to shower afterward.
Okay. Now, remember at the very start of this, Sama, where you were asking me, where do we want this conversation to go? Well, let's dive into the rabbit holes. Now, you're talking about experiences that people have while they're doing their flotation. Could you describe some of the experiences to us?
Yeah.
No boundaries. Just
okay.
All people come in and say, "Wow, you never believe this," and then they say their story. If you can share some of those, please.
I've had one story is she was the last float of the night. I was closing down the float studio, and she was just sitting there on the couch after her float, just sort of like not really doing anything, just kind of like dazing, just sort of looking at the wall.
Yeah.
And I let her be, it's not like, hey, how was that? Did you have fun? Tell me about, it's like, you got to give people space.
Yeah, you don't do Krusty the Clown on them, no.
Yeah, no. So I gave her space for like 10 minutes, and then I gave her space for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, all right, I got to kind of close this shop up. I walked over to her and I said, how you doing? She said, I'm good. And I said, I'm here if you want to talk about your experience at all. And she goes, okay, here's what happened. I've been going to therapy for about 10 years because I have reoccurring dreams of past lives. And so I've been doing some past life regression work. And I know that one of my past lives, I was the captain of a ship, like pea coat, corncob pipe, the whole 9 yards. And she said, what I just experienced was the death of one of my previous lives. And I was like, tell me more. She said, I was in a battle at sea. I went down with my ship, and the last awareness that I had in this waking past life regression inside of your float tank, Sean, was of me finally letting go. I was floating on my back. The cannons were still firing. There was debris in the water. My ship had gone down, and I just finally let go. And I was like, whoa. So she and I talked for another, half an hour about what that experience meant to her. And it was cathartic. It was deeply, deeply profound for her to go through this experience of letting that life go, because she was hanging on to it for whatever reason. Another experience, in my first float session, I left my body. And it got that later spurned on an astral projection practice that I kept up with inside the float tank for about a year, where I was projecting out of body fairly frequently with recall from the float tank. But this was involuntary. I popped out of the tank, this sound happens, and I am suddenly in this guy's basement, and I turn it 180 and I look back at myself down floating in the float tank. I'm like, okay. And I have been meditating long enough and done enough psychedelics that I know to just keep calm in those situations. It's going to be okay. So I kept calm, and then I zipped out into his backyard, and I saw his backyard, and I saw his dog, and I came back into the house, and I saw his kid's bedroom, and then finally came back into my body, which was the second involuntary out-of-body experience that I had in my life. What's more common experientially is this natural meditative process where people sometimes will come out and go, that felt like 20 minutes to me. How on earth was that an hour? When the music came on to let me know my float was finished, I thought I had been cheated out of my float session, and I was pissed until I realized that I looked at my watch and it was an actual hour. What happens is that when people go into that theta brainwave state, it's punctuated by this feeling, this losing track of time. Time is sort of inconsequential when you're floating like a baby in outer space. And so an hour feels a little bit more like 20 minutes. People maybe think that they've fallen asleep. Sometimes they do, but more often than not, they were just meditating and they've never felt that before. Some people have hypnagogic imagery, which is, the sort of visuals that you get. I don't like the word hallucinations because it sort of marginalizes that visionary state. So what I like to call is just they have a visual experience where it's either like a cloudy purple cloud that's sort of wisping around inside the tank with them, or like fractal geometric shapes. I've heard people, in fact, from that same episode from ABC News, you can still find it on YouTube if you just type in Nightline sensory or altered states or sensory deprivation. It was ABC News. The anchor that was reporting on this story wasn't going to float. And I said, man, John, you have to float. Like, you have to be able to tell us about your experience. You're the guy. And he's like, okay. So he floated, and he talks about his experience. In his experience, he was transported back to his home as a first grader. And he was walking around inside of his old house. His dog was there. His siblings were there. His father was there. His dad had actually died 2 years prior, so he was living without his dad. But he got to hug his dad in this waking, wakeful, altered state of consciousness. He went back to his home as a kid, and he got really emotional about it. He started to cry. He started to talk about how beautiful that was. The mind is we know so little about consciousness. We really don't have any idea where it comes from. We don't, we're learning more and more through sort of quantum science. But we can do just about anything with our minds. And if that's past life regression, fine. If that's going back to first grade, fine. If that's composing a song or writing poetry while you float, fine. That's all fine too. There's such a wide range because consciousness is infinite, and so that experience can be as well.
Does flotation therapy, or can flotation therapy help with school grades, for example, or one's mental ability, improve one's ability to concentrate on tasks?
Definitely. Yeah. Because you're not processing external stimuli, it's an excellent study tool. We've got a lot of college students that go to let the information that they've been studying sink in a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's also some research from the 80s and 90s about super learning in the float tank. Language acquisition is expedited in the float tank because you're not having to deal with the crow outside or bright lights or gravity for that matter. And so you can take in self-hypnosis, go through self-hypnosis inside the float tank, which has been really powerful. One of my staff members learned Swedish in the float tank. It was something that she decided she really wanted to do. So whether you're bringing specific tasks into your float session that you want to work on, or if you want study material to sink in a little bit, the benefits, there's lots of benefits there.
Right. Top athletes like yourself, Sean, and me, would we see a gain in our on-track performance?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, for you, it would be a game changer. I mean, obviously a sporty guy, your body needs a chance to recover, like when you push it, this is expedited recovery. And we've had, Russell Wilson, the quarterback of the Seahawks, float, lots of members of NFL teams and college teams. The benefit is massive, especially for recovery. So expedited injury repair because of the magnesium, because of the lubrication in the joints, because you are getting into a parasympathetic state.
Yes.
So that's the biggest benefit, I think, is for recovery and musculature regeneration.
Ah, okay. The flotation tank uses Epsom salts. Do they always historically use Epsom salts, or do they use common sea salt in the beginning?
They all use Epsom salt.
Yes.
I have heard of other people using like Himalayan salt, Himalayan crystal salt, the pink salt. Mm-hmm. I've only heard of a couple of people doing that, like real innovators, way more out there hippies than me, using Himalayan salt. We actually add some Himalayan salt to the float tanks, just for added absorption of electrolytes and minerals. But Epsom salt is really the go-to.
Have you tried having subliminal music and then suggestions perhaps as sound? Obviously you've got a sound and the alarm to say your hour is up. Put another coin in the slot. But have you ever thought of like subliminal music? I guess the language, that would have been one such example of what I'm asking, where this message is given in a hidden way, if you like, and then taken in.
You could do it in kind of two ways. One way is to play it through the actual float tank, because all of the float tanks are equipped with speakers.
Yes.
So you can play whatever you want. You can bring your phone and bring your favorite playlist and listen to that if you want. Or there are extra long waterproof earbuds that you can wear that have rubber kind of, inserts that you can listen to while you're floating. So you can do like self-hypnosis, for example, something that I toyed around with for a long time.
Yes.
There's a lot of things I want to do. So I would do, self-hypnosis tracks for an hour where I'm talking to myself and building up my, programming my subconscious mind.
Yes.
You want to listen to Dark Side of the Moon? Go for it. You want to listen to Bach or, Icelandic death metal? Like, for sure. Go for it. A lot of other people use like binaural beats, where there's, different tones going on in either ear, to sync, your brain hemispheric integration. So you can do whatever.
Very, very interesting. Have you got any suggestions you have for people that have had life traumas, personal traumas in their life? Would you recommend flotation therapy? Are that just general traumas? It's not war zone ones, but they can often feel like they're war zone.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the safest, most reliable way to confront your darkness.
Okay.
It is a profound opportunity to safely and effectively do shadow work. If there are some dark parts of you that you've been suppressing that are manifesting in your life in various yucky ways, this is a great first step to go in and just see what comes up. Just to go in and allow yourself to relax fully and see what comes up. The things that need processing usually present themselves. And like I said before, combined with other therapeutic modalities, EMDR, talk therapy, those can be an excellent addition to a flow practice where you can see yourself in your purest form. Like your consciousness is a signature, your energetic signature that's just you. There's always work to do. And if you are suppressing trauma in your life or avoiding dealing with this thing or something, or maybe even don't know what it is, to go into the float tank with the intention to just heal. I'm here for healing. That's something that I tell a lot of people to do, is to state out loud in the shower right before you get into the float tank why you're here. I'm floating tonight for healing. I'm floating tonight for insight. I'm floating tonight for purpose, my relationship, the resolution to a problem. Doing that before you get into the tank and then letting that expectation go and just sort of taking what comes is a really an effective way to self-therapize. Here in Washington, cannabis is legal, and I have been a proponent of edible cannabis during your float session to go even deeper, to go into yourself. If you want, it's an altered state of consciousness, just like meditation or a psychedelic. It's an altered state of consciousness. It is consciousness. It's just a little bit different. And the opportunity to really grow and to really know thyself while you are in that float tank is immense. I think everybody's got to try it.
You said earlier you had an out-of-body experience, and you also made a small comment as you're saying the story, how you had your experience and knew to keep calm. But what if you didn't have that right frame of mind and you did freak out, for want of a better word? Is there like a pull cord to say, look, guys, I want to get out?
It's up to you. Yeah, you can leave the light on, or if it's off, you can turn the light back on. You can lean forward and push the door open. So it's not like, so you're not locked in. If you need to get out, go take a cold shower, like regroup, totally okay.
Yes.
What happens more often than not is people who are having a hard time in there, if they're fidgety, if you move too much, you're likely to get some of that water in your eye, and it is so salty that it stings.
Yes.
And that can kind of like, whoa, it can disrupt your zen, your chill a little bit. So if you're having a hard time with whatever you're experiencing, just open the door, get more air in there, turn the light on, go jump in the shower and rinse off and get back in. Yeah.
Do people that have got claustrophobia, can they go in the tanks and they're okay with it? Yeah,
that's the first objection that we hear is, well, I don't like tight spaces. Well, nobody likes tight spaces. Nobody wants to get locked in an elevator, but that's not what this is. Your arms can go all the way out to the side. They can go all the way above your head, oftentimes without touching the inside of the tank.
Yes.
You can leave the lights on. You can bring music to help with that fear of claustrophobia. And I've heard it so many times. I think about it a lot. And I think that claustrophobia is really a manifestation of some other fear. It may be attached to some trauma you've experienced.
Yes.
It may be a body discomfort. It may be pain. But you're in control of the situation. And when people know that they can leave the light on, leave the door open,
Yes.
Turn some music on that makes them feel good,
Mm.
I say go for it. Yeah, if that helps you get in there, do it.
Okay. And probably become accustomed to it. So next time they can go a little bit further and leave the light off, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time on Sam. It's been fantastic. Is there anything you'd like to say before we pull the pin on this one?
Yeah. I think that we all should be more concerned with knowing ourselves better.
Yes.
It should be a priority, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's part of growth. You've got to know who you are and develop yourself. How can people contact you if they want to?
Yeah. So my website is seanmccormick.com, SeanMccormick.com. It's real Sean McCormick on Instagram. The float centers that I founded are called Float Seattle. There's 3 locations here in our area. And I'm an open book. I'm a life coach and a professional coach and performance coach. I love to help people. If you're inspired or you have questions about any of this stuff, please don't hesitate to send me an email, Sean@seanmccormick.com, SEAN, and I'd love to connect.
Thank you so much, Sean, for your time, and thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Okay, and Facebook people, thank you so much for your questions. They're very great too. Okay, until next week, we're talking about pre-birth and birth of your newborn. We're going to talk about that next week. So I'll see you all then. Okay, bye-bye.